Want to get better at public speaking? I've got something to show you. Hi, my name is Vander Puchert and I'm a creative entrepreneur. And I believe most of the world's problems are just interesting design challenges in disguise. I tend to overinvest when it comes to public speaking engagements. And probably like you, I feel like one of the most important things that you need to try and do when you get on stage is to be generous, to add some kind of value to the audience's perspective. The thing is, I think an audience is very forgiving if you make a few mistakes here and there, but they're really expecting to gain something from you when you get on stage. There's arguably a lot of very good approaches and frameworks out there already, but in my case, I was really searching for something that would help me visualize my engagement, my speech a little bit more and kind of guide me away from getting into that rabbit hole of trying to develop slides and sitting in PowerPoint all the time. And I think I found something very interesting. In this video, I want to introduce you to Cisero, a framework for public speaking. I'm going to show you what's inside this card deck, introduce you to the framework, very high level. And then at the end, I want to show you actually a piece of work that I did using this framework. So I'm going to eat my own dog food a little bit. Let's not waste time. Let's get inside here. There's a total of 26 cards in the box. The book itself, though, is super important. Not only does it contain the instructions you need to actually use the framework, but it also has a whole bunch of extra information like different patterns that you can use to put your talk together, how to look at or consider figures of speech, and then also a whole bunch of little small example talks so you can see if your structure is moving in the right direction. Worth gold. So a quick point on how the cards actually function is that there's no real gameplay here necessarily. The cards is really just a visualization of the framework. And what you do, or what they recommend you do, is actually take the cards, stick it on the wall with duct tape or whatever you used. In my case, I did both. I laid the cards out on a table. I also took the digital version that you can also purchase with the physical card deck, and I imported it into Mural and then did a lot of the work in the digital space. But then you should see the cards as kind of like prompts or labels. And then what you do is you put the prompt down and then you'll respond to that prompt with sticky notes. Now, in the next step, what I want to do in this video is just quickly give you an overview of each of the different categories and what they mean. Now, if I have to keep it very simple, I would argue that the groundwork cards are really the building blocks of the talk that you're putting together. The main points development is the skeleton. It's not the actual talk or speech itself, just the skeleton. But then you deep dive and put the whole talk together using the structure cards. And I refer to that as the fleshy goodness because that's also where the creativity comes in and where you actually start building your talk. Now with that out of the way, let's have a quick look at the groundwork cards, or what I call the building blocks. So the first card in each of the different categories is just an indicator of how you should use the cards in said category. Here in the groundwork is very the basics, the grounding block, the foundation of your talk. So for example, what is your goal? Who's the target audience? What equipment do you need for the actual talk? And then of course, very important here is the duration of your talk, because the duration is also related to how many actual key points you can add to the talk, which they give you a guide for in the book. Super handy. So my favorite one from the groundwork card set is actually the expectations and objections. Now the next step, or the red cards, is the main points development. Now if you look at the first card over here, you'll see that the first card actually indicates to you that you have to use the cards in a certain way. And they're also nicely numbered. When you see and you look at the cards, you can see the category, the specific call to action, and then the label or category that I mentioned. And then also, if you ever get confused, they are numbered nicely, so you can follow it quite closely. It's quite clear. Now, when you follow the instruction here, you have your 3 main points laid out like this, or main points cards, and then and finally you have the pattern card. And I'm going to put that separately for now. I'll get to that one. Now, when you're developing your main points, there's 2 things to keep in mind. First of all, you need to think about the duration, because you can only fit a certain amount of main points into your talk. So if you look at the little manual, the manual indicates, and I had 10 minutes, so I could look at between 2 and 3 key main points. And then for each of the main points, you want to consider, what is the key sentence to introduce the main point? What are the main points or facts that you want to use to actually substantiate that main point you're making? And then moving from one main point to another main point, you need to kind of create some kind of transition. Here is a quick, simple example of how it works. With my 10 minutes, I could potentially fit in 3 main points. And this is represented here by the 3 main key sentences. 1, 2, 3. Now, I have my first key sentence, and then I have supporting facts to substantiate that key sentence. And then, of course, I need to go from my first main point to my second main point, and that's why I have the transition. And then you map out what you think that transition should be. And then finally, the pattern card. In my case, I opted for a chronological flow or chronological pattern because I was telling a story that happened over time, which makes sense. So let's get into the fleshy goodness, or like they refer to as the structure cards or the structure step. You'll kick off with your horizontal structure first. So the horizontal elements really refers to the flow of your talk. So the first card is really the intrigue or the hook, or how you set up the credibility. The second is the introduction to your talk. That's to set the expectations. But now this is where things get interesting, because here they've given 5 cards that represents the main points. Now, the main points here is related to what you've built out here in the main points development. So in my case, I only developed 3 main points. I'll bring the main points in over here. And then finally, what happens is that you have your conclusion or your wrap up that comes in at the end. And then you start kicking into what is the vertical cards. Now, on the vertical level, you're working on a draft. So what is the first draft of your talk? And in fact, this is something I've never done before, but I followed all the instructions, as they actually encourage you to write out a draft text of your talk. And I did that. And I must say, the second level is really figures of speech. Where can you bring in figures of speech to make it more interesting, to bring in elements of storytelling? Then, of course, there's engagement. In this world of streaming and live audiences, it's actually important to ask questions to the audience, or actually encourage them or prompt them to engage. The next level is really thinking about voices and gestures. And then finally, number 5, only at number 5, they start asking you to start looking at what kind of visual or content you need to support your message. So you can really see, and also through the example I've shown you that I've built before, that you now map out against all of this. So the first thing to do is to look at the draft, build out the stories, bringing your main points, and then end it out with a conclusion. And then you start diving a little bit deeper into what kind of figures of speech you want to build in to enhance your story. Where do you want to get engagement? Maybe you want to do polls or ask questions, and there's all kinds of different things you can consider. This is where the creativity comes in. And then also voices and gestures, really thinking about where do I use my hands, and perhaps what kind of emotion and what types of emotion you want to build into your talk. And then finally, what kind of visuals you want to create. Cool, there you have it, the Cisero Framework for Public Speaking. And I really recommend it. I really enjoyed how it visualizes, how it engages, and how it kept me busy for a couple of hours. And I must say, I really cut down a lot of time on the preparation, which I think is great, because time is money, But then finally, also, like I promised in the beginning of the video, I want to show you what I created with this tool. So before I wrap up the video, either down in the comments or in the caption, I will leave a link to the actual talk that I did. But in that talk, I'm also going to show you where certain of the transitions happen, and where certain key points happen, and where I brought in some of the considerations like engagement. So you can see how and where the framework actually influenced me. So jump into the comments. There's a link with the captioned talk that I gave at the Entrepreneurs Night event that I really recommend you check out. They're doing it every month, I think, but it's really an event where you go and talk about some of the mistakes you've made as an entrepreneur. And as I mentioned, I used the Cisero card deck framework for public speaking to put that together. So I hope you found this insightful. I'd love to hear your recommendations on maybe public speaking frameworks that you're using, because I think there's all kinds of interesting ways to approach this thing and really figure out how to add value and be generous to the audience, because damn it, there's so many things happening now. We really need to focus in on how we deliver our messages these days. So as always, catch you in the comments.